our clerk. All right. This is a meeting of the Rules Committee of the Representative Town Meeting. And I will call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 6th? Oh, good. I have a hand, but to the second hand. Okay. Any comments, questions, changes, edits? No? Okay, ready to vote? All in favor, please?
Aye.
No, I don't see any. Abstentions? I don't see any. Minutes stand approved. Next item is assignment to committees. We have two folks from District 3. So speaking on behalf of District 3.
Well, you were at the caucus, but I think what you see before you is District 3's
Bill Dunn.
recommendations. Bill Dunn for F&B and Ann King for education.
Okay. Comments, anyone?
No, and since both chairs were in the caucus, they were approved to join their committees.
Yeah, I would remind the caucuses that they can put people on the RTM, but the Rules Committee decides what committee they're on.
Correct.
But not that there's an issue there. Okay, so ready to vote? Can I have a motion then to put Bill Dunn on F&B and Ann King on education?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Patty. Second. Adele's in. Great. All right, ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Abstentions? I see none. Passes unanimously. Lois is the chair of the Rules Technology Committee. She's away at the moment, but will be here later. So I'll skip that one and just go to an update from our distinguished town clerk.
Oh, all right. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to give you all some feedback and get your thoughts on two items that are actually related. I've heard from some members, some new, some not so new, regarding, oh, where do you want me?
Just move a little closer. Perfect.
Sorry, I'm going to talk to you back. The first issue has to do with where the posts are and where people sit when they enter the full RTM in the auditorium. It may not seem like a big deal, but there are some people who feel that they're always in the back and they would like to move forward. Maybe some people in the forward would like to have the opportunity to move back.
It's funny, I'm in District 6 and I love it back there.
Okay. There may be others who don't necessarily feel that way. And I'm not suggesting, I mean, the feedback was that they would like the opportunity to sit in other places within the auditorium. So they get to know a different perspective, maybe meet some other neighbors. So before I moved any posts, I wanted to talk to you all.
So keep people within the district.
Oh, correct. Oh, absolutely. This is
Okay.
purely moving posts.
So here's my.
Okay.
There are those of us who have been on the RTM a while who just kind of go right to your spot. And I can really imagine some of us just going in there.
And
Just
voting
going
for
in that
District
seat we always
1,
sit in.
I think that would certainly happen. What I would certainly make sure when the agenda went out, there would be a notice of that. Over at the podium, I would certainly announce it also to please take a look that please make sure you're sitting where your post is. So that was.
I have no objection.
Can I ask a question?
Frequency of movement of the post. Is this something where each time you come in, you can?
Is it like an assisted living where
Right.
everyone can put you at your table?
It's a test every time.
Yeah,
If you don't
that's right.
pass
Yeah.
it.
I'll ask you a question because
Sure.
afterwards I have two comments.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Question, during
Oh,
COVID,
okay, Adele.
during COVID, we expanded the auditorium for where the RTM sat.
Okay.
And then I know we've moved it back sort of, except for some people, I had this feeling that some people are still sitting way, out of, so how many, my question is, how many rows do you put per district? Because like I said, I'm not sure everybody's sitting,
Okay, the custodians set the posts So I can certainly, is your observation that you feel that they're too dispersed in the room? I mean, we could
I'm
certainly.
not, actually, I'm not complaining. I'm just asking the question.
Oh, I don't know
because
how many
the folks-
rows. What is it?
Because the folks,
4 or 5
the-
rows
the
per?
di-
No,
the districts that are at the
Okay,
back,
great.
the districts are at the back. Those are the ones where some people have sort of floated back. And sometimes you don't know everybody really well. You're not really sure, make sure you who's on and who's not.
I think that's a
So-
valid observation.
So maybe you can mark, we could just mark where it ends.
Okay, I'm also
Fair
happy to
enough.
take any feedback regarding the whole setup in general. So you would like to have like, let's rope off or somehow designate
So just
the
put
end
up
of the
some more
RTM.
sticks. Put up some more
2 more sticks for the end of the
Um,
RTM versus public gallery.
Um,
Okay.
That's
fair.
my observation.
No, it's a good point. Good point.
For somebody who loves sitting in the back of the room throughout my entire schooling career.
Reveled in, we use the word revel.
Yeah, I talk too much, so that way they can right up front. Go figure. I see no purpose in it. But if you're going to be creative, then it can't just be that you're moving 3 to the front and moving other things like that. We should have the people who are on odd numbers mixing with the people who are even numbers. And you should really jumble this up so that you can have the maximum confusion that somebody wants. Because if you really want to implement this, you can't do it in an organized manner. So if you're going to implement it, then it should be that, you know, District 3 can sit where District 5 is this time. And next time we might be sitting where District 1 is, and the even numbers have to start coming over to the odd number sides. I mean, you know, if you're going to be creative because people want to find new people to chat with, then let's be creative on it and just not have a rotation that, you know, 1 in 4 end up moving back to where 3 and 6 is. You know,
Well, I
let's
think from a
really
district
mix it up.
chair's perspective and voting, that would become very difficult from a district.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, is this really a problem is the question I want to have? Or
This
is
is
it,
feedback that I have received from some of your members. It is
Is it a very small percentage?
It is a small percentage, but I didn't think it was a unreasonable request to bring forward to you all, just to move the posts and to designate the end. I think that's a good point, because then you can understand where the public is. I think that's.
Teresa,
very-
yeah.
I think
So,
moving,
mean,
I
if you're
think
moving
moving,
the vote-
Well, I'll get to you, Mike.
So if you're
I'm
moving the
sorry.
vote, like, we're still sitting within our districts.
Correct.
So you're still,
Sitting with the
I
same
mean, you're still
people.
sitting with the same people, like, so you're just, it doesn't make
But
sense.
you're not sitting in the back
neighbor-
anymore.
She said your neighbors, so the people behind you who might be from a different district will be different.
Maybe
You're
it's
not in the
because
back, you're in the
I'm
front,
always
no.
in the back, I'm not turning my back to talk to me, I mean, maybe. it's because of my
Anyway, yeah.
experience.
really, should people be chatting, should people be chatting during the meeting anyway? Shouldn't we be focused on the meeting and voting and? I mean, it's not a social hour.
I think the feedback was more from the people in the back who felt they wanted, maybe those are those people who sat up in the front when they went to class, you know. we've got all different types.
I'm,
So,
My 2 cents is I think moving the post closer makes sense.
all right,
People? Yeah.
let me, if I can just add some reason. This has been this way. The way it's set up has been there since, well, I joined in 85. That would be 1985.
As opposed to 1885 cents.
Well, I thought.
That's when I started high school.
I just didn't, in case somebody was having, well, anyway. So it hasn't, they haven't moved in the entire time that I've been doing this. And I have, my ears are out, I'm listening. I'm not hearing this as an overwhelming. I think people are quite satisfied to be able to find their seat coming in. A lot of them sit in the same one they've been sitting in for years. And I think I appreciate, but I don't sense that this is a majority opinion that we got to move these seating arrangements around. If it was something that you wanted to do, then there ought to be a written plan that's put before the RTM and voted on.
With
Because
the
I'm not in
rotations.
I'm just not in a situation where I want to have people coming in and saying, well, oh, all right, I'm here this week, where am I next week,
Won't be
Yeah, Jack.
monthly, but
No, I said with the rotations, with your planned rotations. We have
Yeah.
8 meetings, which means we can at least get 6 planned rotations in there of where people. are
Because so that
sitting.
you're mixing it up, you've got to move the left side in a different rotation than the right side, because otherwise you're just moving the
Can
districts.
we vote?
you
All right.
know.
yeah, I think,
Have we had
I think
enough
let's
of
move
this?
forward.
Thank you. Next.
Okay, so
next-
they will stay in
Yes.
their place for the next 40 years. Okay. Moving forward.
And that's a shame, because typically if something's been operating for 60 years, I'm the first one to suggest we should.
Fair enough, okay. The second issue, somewhat related, is the request for name tags. That this came from actually a more senior member of your body, and who felt that they didn't know other members of the RTM. So they would suggest a name tags.
Is this only at the RTM or around town?
You could do with it what you continue,
That's
you can take
naughty.
it home with you and wear it all the time. Okay, so that's the idea.
Is
It
this a
kind of
reflection?
highlights-
Well, never mind. I'm not going down that. I'm just not gonna do it.
Okay, the other issue that came up after our last RTM meeting is a district chair reported the vote. After the voting record was posted, I got a call to say, oh, I had the wrong person, or somebody absent who was there and someone who was there as absent in the voting record incorrect. So clearly the district chair, in this case, did not know the membership. One could argue the district chair should know all their members. Had the members all been wearing name tags, it would have been very clear. So it was just sort of a manifestation of not knowing your membership.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you guys can do with this what you wish.
Mr. Orphans.
No, I like, in addition, we have people coming in and out all the time. Some new, some not new, young, some people who've lived in town for a longer period of time. I like the idea. You know, as long as it can be done in a reasonably efficient manner.
With the Darien Men's Association, we all have name tags, and it takes a sergeant of arms and it takes somebody standing there as people are coming out of the meetings to get the name tags back, or you will spend forever replacing name tags that people wear them right out to home and don't remember the next month to bring them in. Then it's a new one has to be done.
I'm sure I could figure out something, but the idea would be that these would be magnetic and then printed on a Avery label put on, that they would be on display or available when you came into the meeting, in the basket when you left the meeting. That would be the idea. If you forgot your name tag, I would make sure there were just handwritten name tags. You could welcome and put your name, and then I could print up, something, a new one.
Do we ask everyone for a $5 and $10 deposit?
I'm sure I could find a budget for
You are
name
diabolical.
tags.
That's what,
No, I just, it's.
Why don't we wait till we see if it's a problem?
yeah.
Okay,
I
so
don't
again,
care.
a suggestion that's come forth.
I don't disagree that having name tags, because there is such a, I agree with Peter, there is a complete flow of people that are coming on, and, I know people. I can't say that if you asked me to give their first and last name, I could do for all 100 people.
So maybe it'd be helpful at committee meetings too.
No, everybody, I know everybody at the
I
committee.
think, what if we just had the committee chairs hold them and distribute them as people came in?
The district chairs.
District chairs, I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. I apologize.
Yeah, and make them the sergeant of arms.
Yes.
Yes,
Speaking
Mark.
as a district chair.
Yes.
With a large new group of members, I think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Certainly it would help in the first several weeks of the session.
Yeah, I agree.
This year in
I agree.
particular.
Just make them real big so you can see from a distance.
Yes, I have Amazon, they were 4" by 3". They would slide right in, magnetics.
I will not be wearing one if I go to the podium. At this stage
Well, no,
of the
but you
game,
announce
people
yourself,
know who I am.
There should just be a
I
cloud.
announce. who you are.
But yes, I do think it's a good idea.
Jack Davis, District 3.
I think after COVID and we came back, I think it was District 2, because they were right in front of District 3 on notice. They handed out name tags because they knew they didn't know, couldn't remember that everybody would know each other. They only did that for 1 or 2 meetings, but I think it's a very good idea.
I do believe though, maybe instead of putting an additional responsibility on the district chair, because there are times where our district chair or another district chair can't make it. I do think that we should just nominate two people, and we can do it roving because we're potentially roving where districts are sitting.
No, that's not
Um,
happening for another
oh,
40
okay.
years. No.
But that we just have two people who run to the back of the room and make sure they collect all these things and put it in the basket as people are leaving. Because otherwise, people are gonna get up and, sometimes not all of us wait to the final vote being announced. No, I'm not. I'm looking at Chris. Not all of
I'm
us.
always there until the final. vote's announced.
Yeah, no, but I sometimes, if it's been a long meeting, everybody stood up. I know what the final vote is. I might be heading out the door before Seth says, do I have a motion to?
That's why I like sitting in the back.
Yeah.
So then
So-
you just drop your name tag.
I think that if we have two people at the back to collect it, from whatever district you're choosing.
All right, can I have a motion
would
to
be good.
adopt name tags then?
I'll make that motion.
Mark, yes, second Peter. Okay, ready to vote? Anything more? All in favor? All right,
Aye.
nice going.
Okay, great. Then I will continue to work with Seth and make sure you approve the name tag, and we'll discuss when it gets
I
implemented.
delegate that authority to the
Or-
town clerk.
Okay, fine. Done.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krista.
Very nice. Okay, well, we.
And by the way, Krista, it's good that you have a good sense of humor.
Yeah, well, you're in with the right bunch, I think. Anyway,
Thank you for all your hard work.
we did skip over a very important item, the Rules Technology Committee update.
As you can see, thank you,
Ms.
Mike,
Snyder.
very much, because our pet kendo is working and Michael is remote. And we're also recording on Zoom here. So this is our first shot at going live with it,
No, we
really.
did the last rules meetings.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, anyway, so the kendo's working, and that's what we're doing now. We're really pleased to have this, and it's an enormous amount of time between, and that Mike's put in to make this happen. So, and Channel 79 is the funder of the kendo, so that's impressive also. On another note, the town has kicked off a project to look at technology for the auditorium and other parts of town hall. This money was approved as part of the ARPA funding. And the project has been set up where there's a design phase that is being done right now. And it's being done by Jeff DeMeo and his partner, which was the same people who have done the stuff for the DCA and for the Board of Education. So they're going to they've interviewed a whole bunch of people, including Mike, myself, and Jim Cameron, and all the people in town hall. Kate's leading the project, Kate Bush, and we're really excited about it. And, so we'll get it going, and someday, and part of the consideration is just because is how we want to use the technology in the auditorium is a total separate discussion than having the technology and making it work. And that's what we're not walking around proposing hybrid meetings all the time, but it would be really great to know that, one, if we have to do something like that, if we have to go to virtual, but also that if we need a speaker from outside that's going to speak, we can have them up on the screen and have it work in the auditorium. So that's the real goal from my standpoint. We're not really pushing to do hybrid for the RTM, but to have the technology and other pieces. Mike, do you want to add anything to?
No, it's just a tool.
And so I'm really, really excited that after all this period of time, it's kicked off. It's going to be a design phase, which is what we're in now. And then there'll be a bidding phase based on the recommendations, and Kate's in charge of the whole thing. And the money that we're using is ARPA money. So we need to get it moving and going.
When do they expect to go to a bidding phase? Like how long are they allocating for design phase?
Couple months.
Okay,
It won't be till the end of the year till it's done.
okay.
And I believe we allocated $90,000 in
Correct.
ARPA funds for that, should anybody be wondering what was allocated.
And also, well, part of the thing was to be able to use technology on a cart and move it around the building, but we haven't talked about it, but I don't really see that as viable as what we were trying for. I think we have 206, we have this. And if we can get stuff in the auditorium, I think that may be easier than trying to have too many options. The other thing I do want to mention is that GoToWebinar is, we gave up the license because it was too expensive in the town. And so we've talked, the technology committee's talked about it, and we are going to go forward with Zoom for all meetings. We haven't done it yet. Some people use private Zooms for some of the committee meetings. We can continue doing that, but we're gonna go, I have to go to Kate and Jeff Adams, who's head of technology, to ask for passwords, but as far as I know, that should be good. So I think we're shooting.
It saves us money.
Yeah, it'll save us money, so we can get rid of the GoToMeeting license. And we can just use Zoom for everybody. And any training or any issues we can assist with. So the goal right now, from our standpoint, is to try and have it by May 1, but I'll let you know.
So just to confirm, I knew that you had told us you'd given up the GoToWebinar, but so we're going to be giving up the GoToMeetings and all go Zoom.
Yeah, Kate, she says it's just so much more expensive, and we already have Zoom licenses that are underutilized.
Great.
And most of us know how to use Zoom. So,
But we'll still do the same setup where you let me know when you're gonna meet, and I'll set the meeting this time. It'll be in the town account on Zoom as opposed to GoToMeeting.
And can there be multiple meetings? So like when Adele's
Yeah,
trying to do a
they'll have to
meeting?
have at least two. They'll
Okay.
have to have at least 2 licenses.
and Mike and I will continue to use our personal
Yes,
licenses.
so we've been able to balance 2 licenses for everybody, because she uses hers for
Public health and safety.
and I use mine for,
What if there's 3 meetings in the same night and neither one of you guys?
it hasn't happened in 3 years.
Okay, cool.
But
Now
that's
that you
when,
said that, it
that's when
That's okay.
Mike's license has been used in the past.
Yeah, I've done, yeah, I have, I guess if there was, yeah, I did do.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, one of us will cover the meeting,
Okay,
or
we did.
kick the meeting off or something like that if we need it.
Because sometimes there's like 4 or 5 meetings go, well,
But right now, we're
yeah.
doing a lot of.
No, I love it. I think it's
We're
great.
doing a lot of in-person
Yeah,
meetings,
yeah.
so in-person meetings don't need
Yeah.
this. So it's only if you really.
And you guys have your own Zoom, but if we,
But
for
if
Adele,
if you were doing an in-person hybrid.
Well, in-person hybrid, you need this and that you need.
And we
a lot
trained,
more.
we trained 3 videographers last week on how to use the Zoom. So, or how to use the CanDAO. So they can set up the CanDAO and then they'll record it the way they usually do on that unit. Jim was short a videographer tonight. That's why we're recording on this.
But remember, if you want to do hybrid, you have to have access to this room. So, or convince somebody else to leave it if somebody's been assigned. But that's where we are now. But it's really nice to be able to report that stuff is working and we're moving forward. So we're happy to be able to say that.
thank you for your hard work.
I was just gonna say, thank you for your help, my goodness. And I just want you to know that our last meeting finally on GoToMeeting, it went perfectly. So I'm so glad to hear.
We still need Kate to approve it. So we'll see what happens.
Lois, is the technology in the senior center
Yes.
the same as this?
I don't know what they have in the senior center. I don't know what, the monitor is there and the room is wired, but I don't know what other equipment they have like this. I've never,
The only reason I ask is a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit and there's all crazy stuff going on. I was talking to Kate Bush and she had mentioned something that we could.
she has a
Look into
unit
that,
that's
man.
just like that called Meeting Owl. The only difference is my computer would have to be connected to that unit. And then you have all the different kinds of computers and what the cords are. And this has an advantage of just being completely remote.
But as time goes by, we have more and more people with these meetings, hybrids. Maybe we might need another.
That device is $900, right? We're not
$9.99.
It's $1,000. We're not talking huge expenditures compared to what it costs to wire the auditorium. Anyway, but yeah, if something's needed, I'm sure Kate will address it. And if we can help her, we'd be happy to.
Good.
Thank you.
Can I make a
Great, you do.
suggestion if they're done?
Yes,
Can we just go and assign our committees before we get into Great Island? Because that's going to be a much longer conversation.
it is going to be a longer conversation, but in respect to our distinguished counsel who's here.
I'm not in a hurry too. And these are very simple and they can be done in about 5 minutes.
Yes, they can. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, if that's without objection, then we'll move and we'll just do the donations and do those first, okay? All right. So first is donation of 15,000 for Little League for evaluation of athletic fields. What the assignment would be what? Park and Rec and F&B?
Yep.
Okay. Special appropriation, 40,000 for engineering study of the Norotan Heights Fire Department retaining wall. What would PH&S and F&B?
Yes,
Okay,
PHNS is lead.
yes.
Thank you.
and then special appropriation for the dynamic.
But can I ask a question? So, you
And
said,
I'll just call them for one vote for
yeah, yeah,
all of this.
you said public health and safety and F&B. Does Public Works have to be
I wondered that
any
too.
involvement in that? Since
Because it's a wall.
Yeah.
Not on
Well,
And
this one.
because it's on that
No,
property?
not on this one, but on the next one, it does.
Okay, why not on this one? Just so we understand.
Because on the estimate that you have for the 34,000
40.
for dynamic speed signs, it does have a public works component upon it because they're installing them. And they've actually added some cost to it based upon like cement and other things to make sure that nobody walks away with our speed
So
signs.
there's no public works element to the firehouse wall
Not for this, this is the engineering
study.
study,
Okay,
not the implementation.
Okay,
We
okay.
may need it, should we do the implementation.
I think the stairwell and the sidewalk that is above it
Mhm.
is not a sidewalk, a street sidewalk. I believe it's on that property
Okay.
completely.
All right, so, and then for the special appropriation, dynamic speed signs, lead PH&S,
Yep,
and then Public Works and F&B.
yep.
Okay, so can I have a motion? 15,000 for Darien Little League, Park and Rec primary, F&B secondary, special appropriation 40,000, PH&S primary, F&B secondary, special appropriation 34,000, PH&S primary, F&B and Public Works secondary. Can I have a motion? Thank you. And yes, Patty, second. Ready to vote?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I
That's
I would-
Michael with a yes, so it's we're unanimous.
would also like to add something else since we talked about the police department. The Board of Finance voted to approve $40,000 to do the engineering study for the expansion of the locker rooms. They took it out of the reserve fund capital. We're going to be addressing that at the F&B meeting because I've been asked like 7 times whether or not that's okay. And I personally think it is. There's another 125,000 that will be coming down the road. But I'll say it now, I'm going to mention it in the other. You know, I think there should be something else that's part of that, which is while our police force is constantly looking for the best candidate and one who will fit into our type of policing that we want in the town, since Chief Anderson has taken over, we've grown from 8 female officers to this 11. There was one that didn't work out, but to 11. And that really is not that they're looking for diversity, but it's the mindset to say that when you're looking for the best qualified candidate, that somebody who happens to be a woman or a person of color can qualify for that. And that's a special mindset that we have in this town. And that's part of the reason why I'm bringing it up, that we should recognize what the police force and the administration has been able to do. I think it makes our town a better place.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, good. So we voted that, right? So we voted the 3 appropriations. There's nothing to do on the 40 that you talked about. It's just a
Absolutely not.
statement. Yeah, right. Okay, good. All right. Now we have Great Island Purchase. And what I'll do, I'll kick it off and try and summarize it and then open it. The RTM was asked to approve 103 million for the purchase of Great Island. And at the time that we were asked to vote on that, and some of this is my own theory, so you'll recognize what's my theory and what you may or may not agree with. But at the time, I don't think everybody thought that the purchase for 103 million was purchasing the island itself, the property as is. And that the additional language thrown in by the bond council was just a statement of all this stuff is included. You're buying the property as it is. When the next, so that went, that went right through. I think the town, I think the RTM wanted to buy the island. I think it was a good step. The next thing that we have is the announcement of the final closing price, which was $85 million. So that brought up the question, well, wait a minute, we approved the purchase of the island for 103, it came in at 85. There's $18 million sitting here. How is that supposed to be spent? Obviously, it's a significant amount of money because both the buyer and the seller agreed on the 18 million deduction. So it wasn't a lightweight matter. It was something that was key to, let's say, the final purchase contract price. So the question that was raised, and I raised it at OPC, is, well, what's the 18 million going to be spent on? Well, we found a little bit out in a debate on the Board of Finance. They found they wanted to bond $6.5 million, and that
They wanted to use 6.5.
use $6.5 million. Thank you for the.
Because it's not necessarily what it's going to be spent on. The question was whether or not some of that bond should not have been rescinded to more appropriate what the cost of the actual purchase. And I'm just saying one other thing.
Yeah.
And you and I said, look, based upon how this was structured, the purchase price was still 103 million. And somebody took issue, I'm not going to get into who it was. And we had a little text debate going on there because I said the purchase price was still 103. So I spoke to Jen, and Jen understood exactly what I was saying.
Jen Tarneski, she's the
director of finance, where I was still saying that the acquisition cost of the island itself was still 103 million, because anything else that we're doing in there from an accounting perspective, we're going to capitalize onto the asset that we're putting on the town's books. So acquisition costs, based upon how that was written, was still potentially 103 million. Didn't approve everything, which I'm going to ask to go into executive session on one of those aspects, which I don't think it approves. And so I just want to explain that that's part of the discussion that's going on, which was raised. And, I'll let you go back and then I'll add my other comments.
Got it. So at the OPC meeting, right after the press release, the next morning, I said, hey, well, we didn't even talk about an $18 million. So where did the 18 million come from? What is it? Well, we, the first answer we received was you approved it. And read the bond resolution that you approved, that you approved additional costs to, let's say, remediate the property.
Very legal things are important. Improvements to the Great Island property.
Right.
All right. That's different than some other things what they may be using it for.
So, so that's still out there, except that we got an indication of what 6.5 million of it was, right? Not by any disclosure from the Board of Selectmen. It came out in debate on the floor of the Board of Finance, okay? So the rest of this 12 million is still on the table. Which brings us, and they're saying, well, the RTM really doesn't have anything more to say about it because you already approved the 100. And what I would say to you is this, that's an interesting theory, but it hasn't been tested. And there is some argument that could be made that the language thrown in by, first of all, the people who are voting on this are people from the town of Darien, okay? And bond counsel is bond counsel. They want to sell bonds. And so they're going to write up a resolution, so they're not going to have any trouble selling bonds. And that's fine. But that still doesn't cover, one theory would be, no, the RTM was simply approving a gross price all in, which was described in the bond counsel resolution of what all in means at 103. Well, the way that this negotiation came out, and I'm not sure at the time that we approved the 103 that anybody thought that there was going to be a lower price. I don't think the Board of Selectmen thought it, the Board of Finance or anything. It came out as part of negotiation. And that's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that we've had anything to say about the approval of the 18. We know what part of it is, 6.5.
We don't know what that is because we still have no detail on that.
No.
And I will remind that based upon the conversation on the Board of Finance, the Board of Finance was very quick to get an executive session with I'm assuming town council and Monica to explain more of what was going on. Now, while we had executive sessions when people wanted to push this through, we've heard crickets about whether or not an executive session is worthwhile to the committees that approve this to provide additional information. That's number one. Number two, it was stated that before any improvements are done to this property, it would be done in a committee and brought forward. If nobody believes that that's what's saying, let me know because I'll put together the videotape of what's there and I'll send it to the whole town. All right, that's what we were told. But that's not what's happening here. In addition, and I have a rough idea from just being an intelligent individual what they're using the 6.5 for, potentially. I have no other information. But the other thing that has me concerned is in the 6.5, they are putting in 3 parking lots. And those 3 parking lots pretty much will determine where activities will be set. And that again was not what we were told. All right. So I'm going to say a couple of things here. Number one, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I've also taught my children that you can do whatever you want and you're responsible for your actions, but you cannot control the reactions that happen because of your action. So over the years, we've been very flexible with allowing these bond counsel to be pretty wide open and giving them some flexibility because sometimes we've had 4 projects in there and they could move it. If the sidewalks were costing a little bit more, they could allocate it to that versus something else and move some of the bond money around. I think that the RTM can also do some things. Not saying we should, but I think it's a recognition that we are responsible for doing certain things. And if it's not going to rescind or start to have a better conversation, I think that, quite honestly, every new bond resolution that comes before the RTM, we will take out that flexibility language. We will also add in the exact cost of each one of the projects that are included in the bond, which is consistent throughout many states and many towns in the state of Connecticut. We don't do that. And that would put in an insurance that we're not going to come up with an $18 million bogey to deal with certain things. So just so that people understand, that is something that's totally within our power, and we can do that. So I'm not threatening, I'm just with everybody else saying what they can do and should do. We have something we can do as well.
Okay, other comment, yes, Teresa, then I get to.
I'm not surprised by the 85 million, and here's I am one of the 13 people who voted no, so full disclosure there.
That's a mine.
But I will say this, what bothers me a little bit going on right now is that we were rushed into that $103 million. I mean, we put more thought into Highland Farm as an RTM than we did into Great Island. And we were told there were multiple bidders. Well, if there were multiple bidders, they would have purchased it between the time we voted and the time we're now closing. So just a lot of problems with that. But because I feel like we were rushed, I'm kind of with Jack on this. I mean, I don't know, I just feel like we're kind of being kind of pushed around here a little bit, so.
Not for pushed around, we're being told
Okay,
to
Peter, and
pound
then you.
stand.
Do we know if Monica,
One sec,
like they have a
Pat.
meeting
Yeah, I'll
going
get you.
on? I'm just wondering
Oh.
if those details were discussed.
Tonight.
They had a 7 o'clock meeting. I wish our meeting wasn't on the same night.
No.
Doubt it.
Yeah.
No, that's not what that meeting is. That meeting is also to create a committee,
Yeah.
which is completely opposite of what we were told that committee would be. This is a committee of all government people with 3 other people to be selected,
I'm
but
aware
it's
of that.
I
I
know.
just didn't know if she was giving more details tonight.
If
But
she
we don't
did,
know because we're
if she
here.
did, she would have had to do it in executive session. I understand that executive session is probably necessary because there's still some negotiations going on, and we don't want to interfere with those negotiations. And I have comments on that, but I would not say it unless we're in executive session. But the fact of the matter is I said right from the beginning, we did vote for 103. But I think John Wolcott mentioned something very well in that Board of Finance meeting, and there were several other people who spoke very well as in addition. But what he said is that if it was 103, you would have come back to the Board of Finance and the RTM for that matter to put the 6.5 through. And here's the funny thing. I have a rough idea what the 6.5 is going to be used for, although I have no knowledge of it. But if they came back to the discussion on the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM, that 6.5 would have easily passed. So this isn't about what they're doing with the 6.5. This is about process and procedure, and whether or not the RTM is a legislative body here, or we're just, what's your word for it?
Chop liver.
Thank you.
You want to add any
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
chop liver, Peter?
That's fine. I appreciate that. I think you accurately summed up, you made all these points. There was no discussion of a contingency for what I call this a sort of a bond, unanticipated bond and surplus. And I must say that while the resolution does use the word improvements in paragraph 1, sentence 1, the June 2nd memo from Kate Bush mentioned no money, there was absolutely no mention of improvements there. The 103 million was for the purchase period, but we had no expectation that the sales price was going to drop down and produce a surplus. And I think that there was, at least on the RTM part, and in fact by some of the discussion, the Board of Finance, there really is no reasonable intent that surplus should be used without some degree of further discussion. There was no blank, the words of one Board of Finance member, it's not a blank check.
Right.
We concur with that. But so I think the real question is, when faced with this situation, like, what do we expect to be happen? And given the ambiguity in terms of the memo from Kate Bush, given the fact that this is completely unanticipated, I think really from my point of view, what I would expect as an RTM member, and especially on the Finance and Budget Committee, is that the Board of Finance would say, let's hold off on how this money is going to be spent. Let's at least talk with the RTM. And again, it's been said already, 99 out of 100 times, what's being proposed, all we want to do is find out what it's for. And is this reasonably related to what's going to be, the island is going to be used for, and with a reasonable showing, we're going to go ahead and approve it. And so I look at this as, the idea that that $18 million, I think the $18 million should be discussed with, and in fact, come back to the RTM for reauthorization, because if I'm correct, in fact, we could actually change the bonding language and bond it back to 85. And maybe
Plus-
I'm wrong in
plus
this procedure.
closing costs.
Right. And maybe I'm wrong in the procedure, and that's fine.
Annalee said my comments were sort of related to Peter's in that when I
I'll
read,
get to, Mike, I'll get you.
okay,
So-
sorry.
That's the reasonable approach, would be to come back to the RTM with this and say, this is we want to spend 6.5 million approximately on the following things. Here are the details. Again, if it wasn't for Board of Finance discussion about this, we would have no idea that the 6.5 had even been proposed. We still don't know what the actual details are, what the spending is going to be. And that's just not good business. And I think even one Board of Finance member said, it's good government if we were to come back to the RTM and have discussions about how this money is being used. And I think really all we're looking for, like anything else that we approve or disapprove, is we just want to know what the details are and how the money is being spent. And so that's where I would love to see some partnership and open-mindedness in terms of how that 18 million is going to be used by coming back and talking to us.
Okay,
That's it.
Peter, thank you. Lois? Michael, you're next.
No problem.
So I was late because I was in the Board of Selectmen meeting. And what I did was request that they change the charter that they were doing. And what the request was that in point 6, which doesn't really matter, that they change from saying presentation to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM. They say presentation and approval to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM for all infrastructure plans and related projects. I made that request. That's all that we can do in this environment. Jenny and Ralph, I think, are here.
Yeah.
And they also made some requests, which I supported, about who was on the committee and how it was going to work. And I don't want to take a second and maybe we can is there a quick? Okay.
We'll have comments from the committee first and then
Okay.
do that. I didn't see, I made one mistake. My back is to all the folks who are, I don't know how many people are back there, but I'll turn my chair around.
No, I just happened
Or
to know.
move.
I happened to know they were there, so my face lit up because it's like, so what happened?
So,
So anyway,
So
good.
Well,
Mike-
Lois,
So Michael should get a chance.
yes,
yeah,
can we do
no,
Michael?
are you,
I'm done. I'm done.
Michael?
Thank you. My comment was actually fairly similar to Peter's and how when I was reading it, and I mean, I'm not an attorney, so I defer to others, including counsel here, and to Peter, certainly. But my comment was just, I don't think anyone, I can't speak for others, would have perceived that the vote allowed for discretionary spending if something wasn't being spent for the sole purpose of purchase. And that was my take. And I didn't read everything as at the level of detail that Peter did. So I appreciate that he did. But I looked at this, I had the same quick read or quick summary from my quick read, which is at what point does it say that if there is any savings or what have you, that it could be used at their discretion. And for me, when I watched the Board of Finance meeting, I had that same question all throughout their meeting, which was, how is this becoming a discretionary spend? So that's my 2 cents, Steph.
To the extent that he says it in a more accurate and concise manner, I defer to that.
All right, Jack.
There is one other point. And can we just shortly go into executive session to discuss access?
We want to go into executive session to discuss.
There's still an issue on access. I do not want to have it in an open conversation. All right, because they potentially are still negotiating that. So I think executive
Do you think it's
session,
an item which may be under discussion now and which we should do an executive session?
yeah, yes.
I'm sorry, Lois,
Could we hear what happened in the meeting before we move on to Jack's point, which I totally support, but I would love to know what happens in the meeting upstairs on this point, because they just did the charter. I don't know if they did.
They did.
They did.
well, all right.
Jenny's right.
Seth, I can bring a chair up there if you
No.
want to move.
You have to come up. Jenny, you have to come up so you can be
You're gonna be
heard.
on TV.
Where do I stand?
Stand behind Mark.
Stand right in
Mark.
front of
Mark,
her.
Mark, right
In
there.
front of you.
There you go.
No, and then I'll go in.
Right there, right here. Yeah.
You're on.
You're on.
Yes,
Right there.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Jenny Schwartz, 8 Saddle Ridge Road. Thank you. I'm a member of the RTM FNB. Yes, I just attended the Board of Selectmen meeting. Lois, they did not address your particular comments with respect to adding the word "and approval of," but they did address the comments that Rolf and I made with respect to modifying the composition and the construct of the membership. They removed the planning and zoning chairman, and they added one more member of the public. And they reiterated that this is very much an initial phase, an initial advisory group, that this is really, they did not discuss what the initial costs and the improvements or whatever we're calling them are, but this initial advisor group is going to be monitoring and they volunteered you to Jim Palin to be the treasurer of the so you're
did.
yeah kind of yes, so a member of the Board of Finance will be involved, but they there was no discussion on what the cost is really for, and that they assured everybody that the next step would be to create an application process for people to apply for what would be ultimately the next phase of the next formation of the advisory committee. So this initial advisory committee is just to oversee this, I guess, the 6.5 million.
I didn't read it as that. And
I didn't read it as that either, but that's what they said.
And I also don't trust that that's what it's there.
Okay, so that's.
Because with the fact that they have having in their mind an $18 million slush fund, all right, to spend how they want to, all right, there is no reason for us to just accept their word. And the original committee that we were promised did not have 5 different people from the government and 2 or 3 people from the public. So this is contrary. There was discussion of a conservatory. I think the first thing we should be discussing is whether or not there should be a conservatory before we spend any money. So there's a whole bunch of things. And while I appreciate what Lois attempted to do, I do not support this committee because I believe this committee is not what we were told. And there's enough film out there and video that runs contrary to what we were told in all the meetings in the public hearings. So while I like the people and I don't think anything nefarious is going on, all right, it's just not consistent with what we were told.
Okay, are there, Jen, anything?
That's it.
Okay. Members of the committee, anything further? What I might do is recognize town council to give us a picture of perhaps what we have done so far, you know.
Seth, I would
legally.
like to be able to go into, because I think I have a very important point regarding that $18 million and what constitutes other improvements and what does not constitute other improvements,
Well,
and the willingness to challenge that if necessary.
I'll make a motion to go to
I
executive
think,
session.
yeah, I'm just thinking on whether it's appropriate or not. And whether it's in order or out of order. I think.
Do you want me to say it
Well,
publicly and interfere with negotiations? I have no problem with that.
I think,
Decide what you want to do.
I have the floor. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
We give you-
Let me just say this, if you can go to executive session, I think, because of the danger of getting into something that's in negotiation now. But anyone who knows anything about those negotiations is restricted by a non-disclosure agreement. And they're not going to be, whether we're in executive session or not, they're not going to be able to say anything.
Right, but we can make sure that those who have an NDA are fully aware of another perspective that they should be aware of. But if you want me to make those public, then I would advise against it.
Give it a chance.
The interesting question here is whether or not the fact that you bring up something that may pertain to the negotiations is protected or not. And under Robert's rules of going to executive session, I think I'll defer. I always leave the really, really easy questions for town council.
And he always thanks you for that.
Yes, I'm very popular.
Let me make 2
Excuse me?
points.
No, I've got other thing to deal with here. Yes,
2 points. Let me say, number one, thank you for having me. And number two, having been part of a legislative process most of my adult life, it's nice to see that there are still some committees that get along with one another and can talk with one another without fighting or calling one another names. I congratulate you on that. We don't see a lot of that today. Let me respond first of all to Jack, if I could. Jack, I'm not entirely sure of what issue you're referring to. Let me make it clear for the group that under the statute, it's 1-200 of the Connecticut General Statutes, which is the Freedom of Information Act, which would control this. They define executive sessions, and they give a series of possibilities. Subparagraph D of 1-200 is discussion of the selection of a site for the lease, sale, or purchase of real estate by the state or political subdivision of the state of which we are subdivision. When publicity regarding such site, lease, sale, purchase, or construction would adversely impact the price of such site, lease, sale, purchase, or construction until such time as the property has been acquired, which it has not. All proceedings or transactions concerning them have been terminated. We don't have either of those situations that exist now.
Actually, we do. My comments have to do with real estate and the transaction and the potential purchase. So you want me to keep on going?
I think the property has not yet been acquired. The transaction has not been terminated. The question is whether or not your comments, if made public, would adversely impact the price of such site. That we have a contingency-free contract, we don't have a terminated contract. So I'm not sure what your comments relate to, so it's hard for me to pass judgment on. I'm outlining for you the circumstance under which one can go into executive session.
Okay, in order to resolve this, so we're not spinning our wheels, if you don't mind, you and I can go outside for 2 seconds and I'll tell you exactly what I intend to say. And then you can determine whether or not that requires executive session. And I will go by your rule.
That's fair. Let's do
All
it.
right, let's do that now.
Mr. Moderator, can I pause the meeting? Pause the
let
recording.
me say, we still will have a quorum. They could be settling that. I think I have,
You can vote on.
generally, this is a meeting of the committee.
But she wanted to address this. thing.
Yes, I know, sir. That's, I'm explaining that I'm well aware that she has a question. I just want to explain, I don't see any reason why we can't continue and listen to this.
Actually, Wayne probably needs to hear it might not even be appropriate. So Susan Marks, District 5. My question was just more procedural. Is this really something that rules should be discussing when we don't own the property yet? And as far as going into executive session, not going to, I was just trying to understand how this relates to how rules functions, basically. And I think Wayne would have answered some of that question because.
Well, I'll explain. We have money now that's being bonded. Okay, we're going to the bond market for money, even though we don't have complete ownership of the property. So it's appropriate. We don't have any choice.
So does rules have the, or does the RTM, I don't know the answer to this. Is the RTM capable of rewriting the bonding resolution, or is that a Board of Finance issue? I don't know.
That's not on the table at the moment. We're just discussing what's.
But you were discussing that as you discussed all this. I guess I'm trying to understand where the rules part starts and where the whole RTM takes over.
Rules on the Appendix B sets the agenda for the representative town meeting. Yes, Jim.
Jim Palin, Board of Finance. I just have a quick question. Regarding this discussion, is this a matter is this related to something that you're putting on an agenda that the RTM will ultimately take up and take a vote on, or is this just sort of general open discussion? I thought the purpose of this was to discuss items that had to go before the whole RTM. You would organize it onto an agenda, and then you would assign committees to review and report back to the full RTM on things that come in front of the RTM. As we all know, because we've all been doing this for many years, for a bond resolution to be passed, a spending resolution to be passed. There's a 3-step process for that to occur. The Board of Selectmen determines a need, and they pass a bonding resolution. If it's then passed by the Board of Finance, the Board of Finance votes on it, and it's passed to the RTM. And if they pass it, if all 3 parties pass it in succession, then that becomes a binding and effective spending appropriation and a bonding appropriation. And then the good news, like we just did 3.5 weeks ago, is when the Board of Selectmen, who initiated that bonding resolution, wants to amend it, they make an amendment to it. It then goes in front of the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance amends it. And then gets put on the RTM agenda, and it goes to the RTM. And if the RTM passes that amendment, it then becomes effective. So we just went through this with the on the track. It was set for $400,000. Came back. There's going to be a little bit more. So the RTM modified it, sent it to the Board of Finance. They agreed on the modification. So Board of Selectmen, then Board of Finance, and then went to the RTM. So that's how you create a bond resolution and pass it, and that's how you modify it.
You said what I was trying to say.
So I think if Wayne wasn't out talking to one of the members, he'd explain the same thing.
Yeah, well, just what's at issue here is the question that's in members of the RTM mind is the difference between what they perceived they were voting on and what other people, boards, feel we voted on. And so what we're doing is talking about that, putting it out on the table, and then seeing where we're going to go with it. And
you mean like in terms of putting it on an agenda item for the RTM?
It can't go on to it could go on to the RTM agenda by a petition. But the Rules Committee is addressing the question and seeing where we're going, if anywhere, and what can we do or can we not do. So that's the purpose of this debate.
So the debate that you're having now, is everyone aware that the town just went to the rating agencies?
Yes.
The town printed a official statement.
Yeah.
And the town is scheduled to raise funds in 72 hours.
Right. That's why we've got it. That's why we're it's almost moving faster than we can move. If there's any question about it.
I guess just as a guy that needs to sign the papers, is this body here proposing putting something on the agenda
Not
related
yet.
to this?
We have nothing, we have no proposal on the table yet.
Okay.
It's urgent now. I won't say that. I understand the problem perfectly, but for the issue or the questions. But no.
Jim, you're in the
RTM is not
market
there
right
yet.
now,
Let's see
right?
now, Peter
Yes.
and then Lois.
Jim, you were kind enough to describe the process to alter a spending resolution. But are you telling us that, are you representing to us that you will alter the spending of this so that the spending is only $85 million? And that extra 18 will be coming back to the town in some capacity?
What I told you is that in order to modify the bonding resolution, the Board of Selectmen needs to determine that they want to change it. Once they make that determination and it's passed, it goes to the Board of Finance. If they agree on the amendment, Peter, it then goes to the RTM. And if a majority of the RTM members agree on it, then that bonding resolution is changed. Otherwise, it's not changed. It's a valid bonding resolution. So what I'm just trying to understand, again, as the guy who's going to market in 24 to 48 hours to complete raising this money, what exactly is the RTM proposing to do here?
Well, I think we're trying to figure out what is the appropriate way to handle an unanticipated surplus, 18 million surplus of bonded money. Hypothetically, if we could turn back the clock last June and say, okay, here's the sales price is 85.
Yeah.
And then none of this was all be moved. But again, I think Seth was, accurately described this. If this is something that was really outside of our imagination, for lack of a better expression. And so what's the best way to handle having $18 million of surplus bonded funding? And shouldn't the RTM in some capacity have some input at how that money is being spent, I don't even think we're sure about what the correct procedure is either. That's the discussion we're trying to have.
So you're saying the RTM has never approved like a large bonding resolution where they know there's going to be a big surplus in it?
Not in my time.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose,
I can count twice in the last 2 years that you've done it.
Well,
Like what?
For this amount, for this significant amount of money?
I have a
yeah,
question.
well,
The public
Yeah,
Joe.
please, right.
Had the opportunity to have a referendum on this, that they were not given the whole picture. Possibly might have had a referendum, but they knew that there's gonna be slush money.
So Jim, can you clarify for all of us? So if I think I read the Bloomberg article, you're going to market for 115 million, right?
Yes.
Can you clarify break down the 115 million for all of us?
It's the 85 and the 30.
85, and then how much is going to HHR?
So there's 85 approximately for the
Right.
island to purchase it. And and there's about 500,000 or so of closing costs.
Right,
Then there's about 6.5 million, which they've identified as other small projects related to Great Island that may occur. They haven't been determined what they
Right.
are yet. The Board of Selectmen hasn't approved any of them yet. Okay, and then there's about 22 million related to HHR.
So that the difference between the 85 acknowledging the 6 and the 103 that's been approved for Great Island, you're not bonding that other 12 million that's left here. Is that correct?
no, they are.
We're only bonding a portion of the 103. We're only bonding a portion of the HHR. I think there seems to be some confusion. I mean, everyone knows because everyone in this room, I assume, read the purchase agreement, right? The island was originally under contract to be purchased for 103 million, and there was approximately $500,000 of closing costs. Because those closing costs incurred or spanned a fairly wide range of legal expenses, consultants, advisors, studies, other small improvements that might need to be made right away, right? Small ones. That $500,000 was meant to capture all of that. And it had to be defined somewhat broadly, as bond counsel does, to make sure that everything that we did spend, all of that $500,000 could fit in that box, which is defined, Peter, in that first paragraph of the bond resolution. But everyone, I think, realized that it couldn't be more than 500,000 because the island cost 103, we can all add, and we only have $103.5 million bond resolution. So they only expected it to be about $500,000. So now, the first selectman has announced that the town has renegotiated the purchase price down to 85. With respect to that $18 million reduction, there are some costs that the town may incur, depending on what this advisory commission comes up with and decides to do. There are some costs related to items that drove that discount. There are some other costs related to other things that are still being negotiated because the town's under NDA and it's part of a, related to an overall purchase that just can't be discussed now. And then there's some other things that Monica discussed that are some initial things that likely need to be done relatively quickly, not hours or days, but in the very coming, in the near next month or so, in order to make the island available. So staff requested, and then the board of selectmen agreed to bond an extra $6.5 million so that the proceeds were on the town's balance sheet. They to determine how they're going to spend it. Okay, they don't know exactly what the costs will be. There are ranges in there, but it was meant to provide ample liquidity so that if in the next month or 2 months or 3 months, the town needs to undertake some of the items that drove the $18 million reduction, or some of the other things that are being negotiated right now, or some of the initial things like Monica just mentioned, like widening the road when you come off of Rings End Bridge. If those need to be done relatively quickly, the town would have approximately $6 million to do it. I think we all heard Monica tell us numerous times, like when this was proposed, that anything that was going to be done with the island would be done, discussed publicly, gather input from the public in all the different committees, and that she would create a sort of oversight committee that would look at all these things. And that's what she's upstairs doing. I mean, most of you missed it, but no money has been spent. What's happening is approximately $6 million will be placed on the town's balance sheet so that if they have to move forward with those things in the next few months, because we generally only go to market once a year. So we aren't planning to go back for HHR until March or April of 2024, that we'll have that liquidity on the balance sheet. Because otherwise, as you know, we're remodeling 3 elementary schools for an $86 million budget. We're only raising about $23 million in proceeds. So we do plan to draw down on the general fund. The 27 million of reserves that we always talk about is not always 27 because we're constantly drawing down for it. We're going to draw down for it for a little bit more of the HHR. We're going to draw down on it for the track that's coming up. We have 2 fire trucks in the tune of close to $3 million. So we need to make sure we keep liquidity in that fund. So that's what that $6 million is. That's a financing transaction. The spending of it, the entire, is up to the board of selectmen. The board of selectmen spends money, we only raise it for them. And they've all said, and they just got done saying up there that they're going to discuss it publicly. So I think some of the words that we use when we say, I don't trust the committee because it's got a bunch of government officials on it. I mean, there was 120 elected officials that approved the purchase of this island. To say that it's slush money, it's not slush money. It's a bond indenture that says it can be spent only on the items that are in the first paragraph of the bond resolution. That is not slush money. That is well defined inside a bond resolution, which was approved by council. There's been $6 million of possible expenses identified, which we're going to raise money for, all of which need to fit inside that bonding resolution language. It's not slush money. And I think to describe it as that is irresponsible, it would be about as irresponsible if you said, if you talked to the building committee at Oxbridge or the building committee at HHR and said, well, we needed to give you approval to raise bond proceeds for the entire price, even though we know that generally we receive somewhere between 5 and 7% state grants back. No one believes that any of our building committees on either HHR or Oxbridge are going to have a $5 or $6 million slush fund. Everyone knows that we had a bond for the entire amount. There is this sort of excess capacity inside those bonding resolutions, but does anyone really think people on those committees are going to use that money and go put a Ferris wheel on the lawn? No. If there's any material change or they need to use that, they would come back to the Board of Selectmen, to the Board of Ed, talk about it publicly, which they do on all of the building committees. So this isn't slush fund. We finance things with surpluses. We finance things inclusive of the grants that we expect to get from the state. And we financed things for the purchase of an island and, God willing, it was able to be negotiated down 18 million, which will have some expenses associated with it. The exact amount, we don't know right now, but,
I don't think.
I
it's-
can
don't think it's
guarantee
in
that the five elected officials upstairs
Or
will talk very, very publicly about everything that gets done on that island.
okay, thanks.
So that's,
I have a
Appreciate
question
it.
first.
Jack?
If you read Jen's memo, which provided some detail, very good detail, and you know that I communicated that you did a very nice job in the Bloomberg press release. But if you read Jen's memo that listed the various component parts of what's being bonded, it did say that there was some deficit spending, and I believe on Great Island, and I may be slightly off, but it was like 1.2, 1.3 million that appears to have already been spent or encumbered, because it said it was a deficit there. I'm assuming some of those costs might have been part of the cost of doing due diligence, because obviously, if you're going in and doing the due diligence and trying to determination what remediation needed to be done, what other issues might be there. And quite honestly, I think you and the rest did a good job on negotiations. So I'm not challenging you there. But there is also the capability that if the intent was for a purchase price of 85 million, I know that there's some closing costs, whether or not it's 500 or 1.2, because there was some costs associated with doing the final due diligence of what was going on. The fact is that you could have also done is rescind part of the bonding resolution and then come back to the various groups, which will be very supportive because we were supportive in the first time, and say, we're gonna need 6.5, we wanna build some roads, 3 parking lots, make sure porta potties are there, because there are none on the property currently, and we're going to be doing some work there. And it probably would have easily passed through the RTM, and if a bond was necessary, that's fine. And so even if you're using this for the first side, that still gives $11.5 million there. And I'm fully aware in reading that contract that other improvements to the Great Island property, based upon how the bonding resolution was written, says that you can spend that $11.5 million how the Board of Selectmen chooses. That's just how the language is. I said
Jack,
that from the
you're wrong
beginning.
there. You have to trust me, you're wrong. On the pre-spend for Great Island, about a $300,000 deficit
Okay.
in the general fund, which it loaned to the project fund.
Okay, well,
So
it's at
that was borrowed.
1.2.
1.2 million is related to HHR.
Okay, thank
And then
you.
we have in
Right.
8 weeks, we start with the.
Right,
high school
no,
track.
that's
So there are
fine.
deficits there. They can't spend it willy-nilly on whatever they want. It has to be in connection with the acquisition and improvements in connection with the acquisition. To use words like willy-nilly and slush fund, they're just not, they're
Well,
not true and they're just not helpful.
well, I'm telling you that we've had significant feedback from both citizens and other members of the RTM saying, what's going on with this 18 million? Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what the 6.5 is, but in reading what was available, I have a rough idea of what you could possibly be using it for. And I tend to believe that if it was a little bit more information given, we could have gone. At the same time, I understand your board had an executive session based upon the conversation you had at a prior board meeting, and such executive sessions aren't being offered to the RTM. I think that would be very helpful.
We
and
didn't have an
comprehensive.
executive session.
I thought you were going
Okay.
to.
I don't know what you're assuming inside your head of the 6.5 million, but I can tell you what was discussed publicly is that it's a combination of closing costs, legal rebate of like
Right.
taxes mid-cycle. It includes certain things related to remediating certain things that drove the $18 million discount, and other things which Monica
Roads and
discussed.
other things, right?
Expanding a road and so forth. So those are the things that have been discussed publicly. I don't know what else you're referring to.
No, I'm
so-
full, I understood those and I wasn't challenging those. I was saying that I could understand why we have to expand roads, why we might need to put in 3 parking lots and other things like that, which is part of that discussion. So that was there, without getting into the details. I thought that there was a discussion after the first meeting where it was raised by Dan, John, and several other members of the board that you were going to go into executive session. Unfortunately, I've been unavailable to follow every one of the meetings. I had a brief conversation on that. So I didn't know if you actually did it. I assumed you did. Shame on me if you did not.
We did not yet.
Okay,
They did
fine.
not.
Peter?
Jim, listen, I appreciate your discussion of other bonding projects where there was planned flexibility here. And this is really what it comes down to. Here, from the RTM point of view, there was no plan for this extra money to be out there to have this $18 million of, as I try to, unanticipated surplus because the price decreased. And so that's really the material difference between your examples and I think what we're expressing. And, we would like to have, heightened discussions, heightened disclosure of the details behind this and how this money is going to be used, ahead of it being used. And I think that would be a great way to resolve the conflict here.
Well, I can't imagine, Peter, that anything will be spent without it first being publicly discussed. Right now, I mean, I get the sense that people think that there's some list of all these contracts and everything right there, exactly what it's going to be used for. It's not determined yet. They're appointing a committee that's going to do that publicly, like every other building committee or advisory committee. It's not determined yet. The money is going to be raised, so for liquidity purposes, we're covered over the next few months if we need to do this stuff. And if we don't need to use any of it, then we'll just reallocate it to the HHR issue or to the track or to any other projects that we have not yet bonded for. It's liquidity right now. The 5 elected members upstairs are the ones that are going to be working with the committee to determine what's actually spent on, whether it's a street sign, whether it's widening a road, whether it's 1 parking lot or 2 parking lots or anything else.
Okay, Mike, last one, let's,
Is it the Board of Finance's intent to have any approval over how the $12 million is spent?
Well, Wayne, jump in here, but just a quick lesson on government here. Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed spend money. The Board of Finance simply provides the money. So once the Board of Finance approves an appropriation for 103 million, which is what we did, and we also approve a bonding resolution for 103. And you all need to understand, we only do those things in tandem because you would never approve 103 million of spending without giving us the permission to bond for 103 million, because we don't have that much in the general fund. And then once the RTM approves those, just like the budget that you all will pass in the second week of May, that's an appropriation and that's able to be spent by either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Ed. So we don't have ongoing control over how it's spent, but the 5 elected members upstairs that occupy 25% of our budget and the 9 over at 35 Leroy that occupy the other 75% are pretty public about every single dollar they spend, and including if it's an excess dollar.
Well, I'm going to make some correction there because all debt, and I've said you've done a great job in this on your board from John and yourself. Part of the budget, which you're calling part of the 25%, is what we're paying for debt. And in reality, that's a choice on how we pay it, and the RTM approves it after that. But that part of the budget, in my opinion, has always been a Board of Finance part of the budget, not the town side, not the Board of Ed side, because how you structure your debt, and you've done a great job in this to level debt and other things like that, is really under the control of the Board of Finance. So that's the only difference that I'm going to make as a nuance.
You all need to realize that once the bonding resolution and its sister appropriation are approved, the RTM no longer has oversight on it. The Board of Finance doesn't. The building of the Oxford School, once we approve the 63 million, the Board of Finance and RTM doesn't oversee the construction of that.
No, but you do determine how we're financing it,
Yes,
what
but-
we're putting forward. And I'm only saying is, when I look at the full budget and it comes to that part line item that's debt, that is attributable to what our Board of Finance does in how they've structured our debt and how they've paid for it, and whether or not it's principal upfront or not. And so that's not a Board of Selectmen or a Board of Ed, it's you guys, and I'm not challenging that. You do a good job on that.
Listen, we're talking about spending.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a $103 million bond resolution, which we're about to go to market under that resolution and some of the other resolutions that we passed, including HHR, right?
His
I wanna-
analysis is correct. They can spend only what you approve.
No, I understand that. And again, this is, I think, I'm gonna go back to my old days. One of my favorite words, when I was a practicing attorney was comedy. I think what we're looking for is comity between, perhaps the Board of Selectmen and how they want to spend that $18 million and us. Because again, I think it was, and I'm paraphrasing here, and if people disagree, please step in. But I think the RTM as a whole authorized $103 million to buy the darn property. And it was as a purchase price. And so what, as was stated by Mr. Walcott, your colleague on the Board of Finance, if there was going to be money for improvement, there was going to be, in addition to that $103 million, that would have to be authorized separately by the RTM through the normal appropriation process. And because that, I think that expectation really controls, at least from our point of view collectively, we're looking for some type of heightened discussion, communication with the spending of that money.
So
That's I think the central part of my point.
Has anyone here seen any spending without any public discussion of it?
Frankly, the 6.5. I mean,
Okay.
until that
Nothing
happens.
has been spent.
Excuse
wanna
me,
reiterate.
folks, I'm gonna just say, I think we've gone down the
Okay.
highway here. I want to just make sure that everybody in the room understands what the issue is here. We had $103 million, was debated on the floor of the RTM and passed. That 103 was to be to purchase the property, period. There was no discussion at any time of $18 million additionally. The assumption was there might be, but that you would be back to talk to us about the additional 18. The other thing that keeps the 18 before us is that, unlike the schools, there was some sort of discussion on the part of the buyers, ourselves, about what that 18 million was. It was strong enough and important enough and big enough that we were able to win a concession from the seller. So it isn't a minor amount of money, and the issues in it are not insignificant. To get the seller to agree to an $18 million discount is a big deal. Congratulations, but there was never any understanding in the RTM that there was 18 more million to be spent. That we didn't doubt. I mean, I don't think anybody would have doubted it, but we would have expected a presentation of the RTM to get approval for the additional 18. And to be kind, I could say the 18 resulted from an inadvertent benefit. Well, that's terrific, but it still sits there. We don't know. We've got maybe 6.5. With due respect to Jack, there's some idea of what that's all about. We have no idea what the rest of it is all about. And I think that's what's bothering the RTM. Now, we have another thing here, sir. Could you tell me how we made out on that?
Jack Davis and I have known one another for a long time.
I-
Maybe longer than we would like to admit. But I think we trust one another. I think he has made clear to me what his concern is, which I understand. I will address that. I do not think that there's a need to go into executive session or go beyond what the conversation that Jack and I have had.
Right.
I don't think we have to face those issues now. Let me add one other comment. When we went into this deal for the purchase of this property, it was the expectation of everyone that the price for the property was $103 million. We also reserved the right in the contract to do certain amounts of due diligence, which anyone with any smarts would do. We did that. We found that there were some issues. Based on those issues, we had discussions with the sellers and with, I think, fair intended, good faith, back and forth negotiations, we arrived at this number. There's no magic to it other than that. I'm not free at this point to say what the other issues are, but we are in the process of having some discussions where we think we'll achieve conditions and performances that are satisfactory to us and that are fair to the town. I think we will get to that point.
Okay. Questions, anybody? At this point, I guess there's more to be learned as we go along. We always have the option to take it up again if there's something that, seems out of line. There is one additional thing. I think a desire on the part of the Board of Selectmen to bring some people into the fold here in the planning, and that is the formation of the Great Island Advisory Committee. This hasn't been voted in yet, but because of the timing we have, I sense from talking to the first selectmen,
today.
they need to get this, they need to have this done. So,
It was voted in today. on Monday.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well,
With an amendment.
all right. Yeah, but not anything that would affect the size of the committee.
No, there was a change in the composition.
Oh,
That P and Z chair was eliminated and an additional public citizen, whatever, was added.
okay. But as far as the RTM is concerned, we have one person on that committee.
Yes,
The way the resolution, it's 9 members, 3 full-time residents of Darien appointed by, now it's more than that.
No,
It's
it's
what,
4.
So that's 4. And then the moderator of the RTM or RTM member designated by the moderator. Thank you very much, Board Selectmen. I am, I'm not, as much as I would love to be, I am not going to do that. I will designate the winner of a vote of the RTM as to who they would like to put on the committee as the person who will represent us. We'll conduct it like we conduct it for the Board of Ethics or, the Blight Committee. We'll have nominations from the floor and nominations ahead of the meeting. I'll put it on the agenda and we'll have an election. And that will be the person who represents us. Yes, Peter.
Wayne, the advisory committee, does it have the same authority as the building committees that we've had for HHR, Oxbridge, and for the garage, the Public Works garage?
I think it's equivalent to that. Advisory committee is controlled under section 18 of the charter, which is just what it says it is. It gives advice to the Board of Selectmen, reports back to the Board of Selectmen on various issues. This is the same concept.
Okay.
But just one clarification, and just to add what Jenny said, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is important. Because it's an advisory committee, its term is only 1 year. Or sorry, it has to be reappointed each year. And I think what Monica said, if I could reiterate, is that this is for the sort of initial non-fun aspects of the work to be done in like the first year. It's not the sort of long-term plan about what this is going to look like in 20 years. But I do think part of the charge is, unlike a building committee where they have the ability to sort of enter into and negotiate the contracts and so forth, this committee will sort of put the ideas and the potential and the contracts and everything together and present it to the Board of Selectmen, and they will be making the decision.
So there is a difference in authority. One is contracting authority and then this one doesn't.
This is a true advisory committee.
Okay.
The building committee is controlled by state statutes. The building committee has certain authority, which this committee does not have.
Okay.
So also this has a 9-person member, and I do recall that it has minority power in there. So, and I'm sure that everybody who's being appointed by the various groups and everything, and Monica will be fully aware of what people's positions are. I have no doubt on that. But just to remind people, in a 9-person advisory group, I believe the minority position is 3, or is it
I
4?
believe it is controlled by statute.
Yeah.
They give you the actual numbers in the statute. I think, I'll double check it for you, on a 9-member panel, you can have no more than 5 of the same party.
Okay,
It's
that's what I was
It's
asking.
It's 6, and it's not a just so everyone knows, it's in the regs, it's called a minority a minority.
Yeah,
right.
Provision, but what it really is a limitation of the majority.
Majority,
So you can have no more than 6 members of a 9-person committee that are from one given party.
That's what I was asking. I was just verifying
Or
that
if you
so
listen to them
everybody
upstairs.
has.
They
Yeah,
want to put
exactly.
together the right group of people.
That statute would
That
apply.
can help.
Yeah, I know that it was
You know, I know it's
mentioned.
not really-
I just couldn't remember if it was 9 or 2. But then I was thinking of the Board of Ed where it's 3, and I was assuming, and I was just looking to validate that assumption and make that public.
Okay,
How
so,
does that potentially impact our vote for a representative?
I haven't been, the first selectman hasn't been in touch with me about how she plans to figure out who's got what. I guess it's, more to be said, I would say.
It can be, it has to have at least 3 of the non-majority party, but it can move up to 4 if those just happen to be the people that get selected for being it. And in the non-majority party, easier to say minority, anybody who's from unaffiliated or in this particular town, a Democrat, but both of those qualify for being part of the non-majority party.
Well, I would guess that we could vote in who we wanted. We're only one, and then they can juggle the rest of them around.
And work the rest out.
Who's the minority?
So the way it works is there's 5 that are determined by choice.
Yeah,
And then there's 4 that the Board of Selectmen put on. So those 4 would have to determine around,
yeah.
if you will, to make it be copacetic. But that said, I mean,
Yeah, I'm not
everyone's
worried
seen the
about
building
that.
committees in this town. They're like the best and the brightest.
Building
Yeah,
committees
that's-
don't
This
have
is
that.
a building
Yeah.
committee, there's different levels of authority.
Advisory?
Advisory has to.
Yeah.
8 minutes to the game. just in case.
Okay.
Can we set the agenda?
Yes, sir, I'm headed in that direction. So, can I have a motion to put the election of the one representative, the donation for 15,000, the special appropriation for 40,000, and the 34,000 for the dynamic speed signs on the agenda for what is it, April 17th.
In that order?
Yeah.
Let's go do the one.
Well,
We should do the
no, I
election
don't,
first.
not in that order necessarily. I'll pick something that allows, it seems to me we could do the election of the representative first and then do the other pieces. The other pieces should follow along pretty smoothly, I think.
Okay.
So that means, Krista, you'll send something,
Well, I still don't
Like
have
where we-
clarity as to how you guys would like that. I think, thank you, Lisa, that,
And we
is there a
we
time frame
voted
in
the
which you want
assignment.
to close nominations, or, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll follow the same procedure that we do for the putting somebody on the.
But we should allow things
And there'll
from
be
the
speeches.
floor.
I'm sure there'll be some folks who want to get up and talk, and we'll allow that couple of minutes. Yes, Lois.
Along with asking the people that are nominated to speak, are you going to allow people who want to support certain people within that have been nominated?
Yes.
That we don't usually do.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
It's this is a major thing, and there's gonna be a lot of activity around it, so I think, yeah, I would expand it a couple of minutes, but I'm not gonna, I get 16 hands, I'm gonna say, look, let's just get this done, okay? Good, so, do I have the motion?
I'll
Thank
make the
you.
motion. So moved.
Oh, and Michael wants to get in as a second, is that what I hear?
Behind the
Who's
curtain.
making the motion?
Got it.
Michael wants to make the motion, okay.
Whatever you like.
Second, okay. Ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Opposed? See none. Abstentions?
And this is one,
Passes.
it's advantage to be in the back of the room
Yeah,
because meeting's over.
Yep.
meeting's over, yeah. Well, no, I have to say new business. I see none. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Peter, second and all those in favor, please rise.
Yay.
Night all.